South Hills, today I want to take a moment and hit the pause button. We as a society tend to run through one event to the next. There's a scripture that I want to read to you that's a reminder of hitting that pause button and making sure we take time to celebrate what God has done in our life. And this scripture is found in Psalms chapter 46, verse 10. It reads like this: "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth." And so today what I want to do is just celebrate what we've been able to do as a community and what we've been able to do as a church that's focused on hearing from God and allowing God to move in our lives. This year alone, we've had 7 child dedications, which means families who are committing to raise their children in a godly way to make sure that they grow up knowing what God has instilled for their lives. We also have had 13 people be baptized. People who are saying, I want the world to know that my relationship with God matters, and I want to be obedient to God's word by having a fresh start and a new beginning. The other thing I want to celebrate is this: 72 people have taken the next step by signing up for our Discover class that ultimately gives them the opportunity to hear what we believe, what we're all about, why we focus on reaching people for Christ, why we focus on taking next steps. And the one that gets me the most excited, this year alone, we've had 284 people say yes to Jesus, to trusting God and believing that Jesus is a crucial part of their life and wanting Jesus to be a part of the rest of their life. As people move into a relationship with trusting God more and more and more, that's something we want to celebrate, such as our first-time givers, people who have now stepped into trusting God with their finances. We've had 302 first-time givers alone this year. People are stepping out in faith and saying, God, I trust you. I trust you more than what the economy is doing and more than what ultimately we're facing. And I'm going to put my faith in you because you are in control. And the last number I want to just take a moment to pause and celebrate is the amount of people who have filled out Connect cards. Every week when you walk into one of our campuses, one of our campus pastors or a host will stand up on stage and say, if you are ready for the next step and you would like to go further in your relationship with God, whether it would be taking a Discover class, whether it be saying yes to Jesus, whether it be signing up and saying yes to being baptized, or saying yes to joining a South Hills group, or serving along the local church, we've had 908 people fill out Connect cards and saying, yes, I'm ready for the next step. And we want to make sure that before we run to the next weekend, to pause and celebrate what God is doing in South Hills Church through all of our church families.
Good morning. It's good to see you all. Good to be back. For those of you who were here, I was able to kick off our last series and am grateful to have gotten the invite back. It's always fun to be here with you all. My wife and girls, we are from Costa Mesa. I guess I should say my name is Sam, if we haven't met. So we are down in Costa Mesa. My wife's on staff here at South Hills on the central team supporting all the different campuses. And we just love to get to visit other campuses, especially the closer to the beach, the better. But it's good to be here with you all this morning. If you are willing and able, would you stand with me while we read a passage from the scriptures? And then we're going to get going in this third week of I Need a Vocation. We're going to start this morning in Genesis chapter 2, verses 2 through 3, and it says this: By the seventh day, God had finished the work he'd been doing, so on the seventh day, he rested from all his work. Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy because he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. If you stay standing with me for a moment, I'll pray, and then we'll move into the message. God, we first of all just acknowledge that you're with us. As we are in your presence, you are in ours, and we're grateful for that. We know that you have something for us this morning, as you always have something for us when we are paying attention. So would you help us see, would you help us hear what is the next thing for us? Would we leave a changed people because we took time to reorient ourselves and our lives around you? This is not just another worship service, but we know and believe that there's power in gathering, in refocusing our attention on you and your word and your people. So would you be honored by that? Would you change our lives? Would you be at work in our hearts in this place now so that you can be at work through our lives as we go on from here? And we pray it in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. Yes, you may be seated. We are in week 3 of this series, I Need a Vocation. And today we're going to talk about Sabbath, what we just read in the creation poem, this time apart, set apart by God to rest. Our family just finished what is the first of our summer vacations yesterday. We're fresh. Yesterday, today? Are we still on vacation? I think anyway, it technically ended yesterday. But then we went to a hotel, so it's still vacation. But it's funny because we went up a little while north of here, and we went glamping. I asked the family, hey, what do you think about camping? And they were like, you're out of your mind, leave the room. What about glamping? So we went with a group of families, but we stayed in this tent, which it was the best kind of tent because there was a coffee pot and a toaster and air conditioning and power. The most roughing it we had was when I somehow tripped a GFI outlet and half of the tent went dark, which was the half that the coffee pot was on. So we quickly rang maintenance. They came and they fixed it. So we've really been roughing it, you guys. Growing up in the Midwest, as we did, camping was, I camped as a boy, and it was you go into a flimsy tent and you sleep on the ground. And I'm just glad that those days are over. I have this nostalgia that I just have realized we're not going to execute as a family. So glamping is it for us. But it's funny when you do these vacations, there's this reality of, okay, we're going to go away and we're going to rest. And then I load up all of this stuff that apparently you need even to glamp. And I'm sweating like a maniac. We haven't even left yet. I got to go back inside to change because I'm so sweaty in the driveway. And then I get back to the car and the girls are fighting. And I'm like, you guys, you're not allowed to fight while the car's still in park. We haven't even left yet. What could you possibly be arguing about? But then we get there. The road trip is great. We get there. We spend a wonderful first evening kind of getting our bearings, getting acclimated. We wake up and this tent has this back patio that backs into just this beautiful view of the hills and trees, and it's just serene. It was picture perfect. But we're out there girls are having some cereal. Amanda and I are having a cup of coffee, just taking in the quiet, looking at this beautiful nature. I go to the restroom and come right back, and a kid is missing. And I'm like, where is the missing child? And Amanda says, oh, well, in the 2 minutes that you were gone, a fight broke out, and there was yelling and shouting, and then there was punching. And so the puncher is in timeout in the tent. I'm like, you guys, what the heck? This is calm. This is supposed to be calm and restful and quiet. There's no punching in the wilderness. But sometimes you find yourself on a Sunday at the tail end of 4 days of vacation wondering if we need to do another vacation to unwind from the vacation, right? If we need to take some restfulness to recoup from our attempt at restfulness. But listen, vacations are great. Time off is great. Weekends are wonderful. But unfortunately, for a large number of us, it's just like the proverbial carrot dangling on a string. We work so hard just to get to the weekend. You might even say, we're working for the weekend. No, okay. I didn't sing it first service. I thought I would try, but that was not a wise thing to do. But we just okay, let me push through. Let me persevere. Let me endure one more day or one more week of this until I can get to a time of rest. And you know, sometimes you can and will find rest and thrill and relaxation or whatever it is you want your time off to be. But the unfortunate reality is oftentimes we're chasing rest because we're exhausted and we are burned out and we're just craving this not work time. The reality, the hard truth, is that good time off can never fix what good time on, or bad time on rather, has broken. Good time off can never fix what bad time on has broken. If you have an unhealthy way of attempting your work, you're never going to be able to experience healing or wholeness in a day or a week or whatever it is off. And part of that is because work and vacation or work and rest are not opposites. These are not in opposition. These are like dance partners in life. Work and rest, they coexist and they're part of a healthy and whole way of living. And as we learned in week 1 of this series, work is a good thing that we often do in unhealthy ways. So it's not that work is the problem, it's the unhealthy way in which we approach our work. So expecting a vacation or a weekend or a time off to fix it, it's like filling up your car with gasoline and then assuming that also will take care of the oil change. Like you can't, when the oil, like you need to get oil in this thing, light comes on, you can't say, well, I've been filling it up with gas all along. Like the car needs both to operate properly. It needs gas and it needs oil. We need work and we need rest. God models this symbiotic relationship of work and rest in the creation poem. And we just read the piece about rest at the end. There's this creating and this filling that goes on for 6 days. And then there's an acknowledgement that it is good, it is very good, and I will rest in that. God works, so we work. God rests, so we rest. We not only do these things because God modeled them for us, but we also see that God commanded it of us. It's funny, the 10 Commandments don't get a lot of airtime in churches these days. But today we're going to look at the 10 Commandments. For the Israelites, the 10 Commandments, this represented a framework that God was creating a new thing. He was calling these people to be a new people, this nation that was going to exist for the blessing of the entire world, a people group who are going to represent God to their neighbors. And so he gives them these commands, which is a framework for how to live that out, how it is to represent me in the world, because we're going to do a new thing, and we need to live in a new way. And there might be others who live differently, but this is the way I have called you to live. That's what the 10 Commandments were rooted in. In Exodus, it says this: remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. It's like very dramatically saying, no one is excluded from this command. Everybody's resting. Why? For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, but he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. So this part of the scripture starts with this word remember. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. And it's an interesting word. Like, what does it mean to remember the Sabbath? And it's interesting because the 10 Commandments were actually written twice in the scriptures. You've got this one in Exodus and another one in Deuteronomy. And Moses, the one in Deuteronomy, Moses and the Israelites have gotten right up to the edge of the promised land. So God had promised them this land, and then they wander for 40 years. And right as they're about to enter, this has been 40 years in the making, Moses is like, okay, hold on one sec. Like we're just here. And he's like, nope, story time with Uncle Mo first. Then you get to go in. But he's wanting to like take a minute and reflect, to reminisce. So he starts to teach the 10 Commandments again, but with a different perspective. And we kind of know this because no matter the length of time, we can look back at an experience or a moment or a season of life when we're older or when we're further down the road, and we have a different perspective on that moment or on that circumstance or season. That's what's going on here. Time has passed. And now Moses is speaking to this group who for 40 years, they've been removed from the very first teaching. A lot has gone on. And so he's saying, all right, kids, gather around. I want to tell a story. And he teaches it in a slightly different way. He says this is in Deuteronomy chapter 5. It says, observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy, as the Lord your God has commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath to the Lord your God. Familiar so far, yeah? On it you shall not do any work, neither you nor your son or daughter, your male or female servant, nor your ox, your donkey, any of your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns, so that your male and female servants may have rest as you do. Again, everyone will rest. He says this, though. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. So in this passage, we see that you need to observe, or what many translations will say, you need to guard. You need to guard the Sabbath. Whereas before we were told you need to remember the Sabbath. But then there's identical rules. Nobody's excluded. We're all taking part of this. We're all resting. But the rationale, entirely different. In the Exodus version of this, the reason or the rationale for the Sabbath is because there's this creation rhythm that God models. And so for a Sabbath, we're going to rest in the beauty, and we're going to celebrate God's work, the beauty of his creation. God did his work in 6 days and rested on the seventh, so we are going to follow that framework. We're going to enter into that creative rhythm of work and rest. It's in response to God, the Creator, and the work that he did. In Deuteronomy, however, the rationale is the Exodus. God freed us from being enslaved. So then we are commanded to rest on the Sabbath. Very different reason. And why would that be? You see, in the Exodus version, the first telling, this group of people would have been freshly freed from slavery. The depth of the trauma of enslavement would have been fresh. The trauma of living through the plagues, of being chased down by the Egyptians, crossing the Red Sea, this would have been fresh in their story, in their community. And it's in that place where God reminds them, for 6 days you will work, the seventh day you will rest. It's almost as if like they're tenderly being told, you have worked enough. You have done enough. You have endured enough. Now you get to rest. There's a softness and a gentleness about it that somebody transitioning into freedom may very well need. It's also a reminder of the natural order of things, this divine flow, this divine rhythm. And we get to be invited into that rhythm. You experienced oppression, horrific slavery. You have been freed from that, and now you get to step into this divine rhythm. For a people group who's shaping this new way of living, how do we exist outside of the systems and the oppression of a Pharaoh, where in that season, in that circumstance, everything about my worth and my value was what I could create. Everything I understand about power had been perverted. This is a revolutionary thing. I used to be measured only against my brick quota, and now I'm invited to rest. This is like we are raging against the machine here. This version of rest is revolutionary. But 40 years later, it's a little bit of a different context. So when Moses revisits this a little bit differently, he's saying, remember that you were enslaved, and remember what you were freed from. God saved you with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, you're being commanded to guard the Sabbath. This is the next generation of Israelites. So those who suffered the cruelties under Pharaoh are gone, and now their children stepping into their adult lives need a little bit of a different telling of the story. They are about to enter the promised land in a position of privilege that their ancestors did not have. And the message is, do not forget what you were freed from. In the Exodus, we're talking about tapping into this rhythm of creation. In Deuteronomy, the Sabbath is an act of defiance against Pharaoh and his slave drivers. In Exodus, it's a way of saying yes to God in this world that he has created. And in Deuteronomy, it's a way of saying no to the system that was Egypt. In Exodus, it's joining in God and his delight of what he has done. And in Deuteronomy, it's a warning to stay away from this other way of living. God spoke through Moses in both times to tell the people exactly what they needed to hear. Sometimes they need to remember, sometimes they need to guard, depending on the season of life, the circumstance that they find themselves in. For you and I today in America and Western society, the message we most likely need to hear is to guard the Sabbath. To guard the Sabbath, to guard our rest. In Egypt, Israel was a group of slaves, and slaves don't get to rest. Slaves don't get to exercise that control over their lives and how they spend their time. Their only value was in what they could produce. They lived to work all day, every day, until they were dead. They lived to work all day, every day, until they were dead. Rest isn't an option for a slave because you don't have that position of power. You don't get to choose. So to illustrate this, I want to look at some of the passages we see in Exodus 5 to get a sense for the oppression that these slaves were under. Verse 4 says this, "Why are you taking the people away from their labor? Get back to your work." This is Pharaoh's reaction against the people who wanted to worship their God. And it wasn't just about the worship, it was you're getting away from your work, because that is the important thing. That is the governing principle, is your ability to work. Then in verse 5, he says, you're stopping them from working. Verse 9, make the work harder for the people so that they keep working. Why? Because the Pharaoh understood the power that this God had. He understood the power of a people who said, I will not participate in this system. So it was, don't even let them get close to that. Because if they rest and they worship, all of a sudden their value is going to be oriented on something else, and I need them to be working. So make it harder. So it's harder to get away from their work. More closely align their identity and their value with what they can produce for me. Verse 10 and 11 says, then the slave drivers and the overseers went out and said to the people, this is what Pharaoh says, I will not give you any more straw. Go and get your own straw wherever you can find it, but your work will not be reduced at all. This is in response to the people saying, we cannot keep up with this pace. The expectation of my output is unrealistic. And the response is, this straw, which you must have in order to form and make a brick, which had been delivered to you, I'm not even going to deliver that to you. You have to go get it yourself. This now just made the work that they could not keep up with dramatically more difficult. And it says, but you cannot let up. Your work will not be reduced at all. This is like the origin of the rat race. It's getting harder and harder and harder to be successful by this measure, but the expectations are unyielding. The slave drivers kept pressing them, saying, complete the work required of you each day, just as when you had straw. Keep going. Do more. Do more. Do more. Pharaoh said, lazy, that is what you are, lazy. That is why you keep saying, let us go sacrifice to the Lord. Now get to work. You will not be given any straw, yet you must produce your full quota of bricks. In this ancient story of oppression, we see these themes that we see today, here, now. If you stop, you are lazy. You need to be doing more. Don't take time away. Stick to what you can produce. Pharaoh was a relentless tyrant. He was a cruel master. It's obvious in the story. No matter how much you produced, it was never enough. And you know what? That evil spirit of Pharaoh is alive and well. It's that voice in our head saying, you need to get back to work. Isn't there something you can be doing? Couldn't you be doing a little bit more? Why are you just sitting around? Nobody else is taking time off. Sometimes it's a whisper in our heads, and sometimes it's a shout. But we all have experienced this. You're only as good as what you produce. You're only as good as the work that you do. There's a little bit of Pharaoh in all of us. It's the desire for more. It's this restless guilt feeling when we finally slow down or stop. This is why we just can't quite turn off the email notifications on our phone or fully disconnect when a child says, come here, I want to show you something, or actually take vacation, or once we take a vacation, we work while we're on vacation, or why we have to sign up the kids for one more thing or volunteer for one more outing or whatever it is in our context. We feel lazy and ashamed if we lounge around for a day in a week. This is the spirit of Pharaoh. There's some statistics about Americans specifically that I feel like in a really heartbreaking way illustrate this thing that we sort of feel intuitively or we see around us. Listen to this. From 1973 to 1990, the average work week went from 71 hours, that's wrong, 41 hours to 4. You guys were like, whoa, what? From 1973 to 1990, the average work week went from 41 to 47 hours. Now, that's like 47 hours too much for me, but like that's 6 hours of a jump. That's not horrific. But get this, the study showed at the same time, the work week went from on average 41 to 47 hours. The time spent on rest simultaneously went down by 37%. So we found a way to work a little bit more and rest a lot less. It says something about our culture. And then what they call labor-saving devices, technology like phones, laptop computers, et cetera, which were intended, to make us more efficient, effective, productive, so that we can work less. They've made it so that we work more. They've made it so that we could work more. There was a New York Times article recently that talked about how COVID, for all intents and purposes, killed the sick day. Because as you had a whole culture almost overnight migrate to, or large swaths of a culture migrate to remote work, well, I can always just join the Zoom call, even if my body is very clearly telling me you need to rest. Instead of staying in bed and resting, we join a conference call, or we dial in through Zoom. COVID essentially killed the workday. Get this, the United States makes up 22% of the world's global economy, even though we only have 4% of the world's population. So think about this, 4% of the world's population contributes 22% to the global economy. California alone, as a state, puts out $2 trillion a year, which is more than the entire country of Italy, even though Italy is 37% larger than California in people. That was a very weird way to say that. Italy has 37% more people, yet the California economy is larger. And from the eyes of an economist, Mark Perry, he said, this is a, quote, testament to the superior world-class productivity of the American worker. And you know who I think would agree with economist Mark Perry? Pharaoh. This is a people who have proven we will do more, relentlessly more. We will work more. We will rest less. We will outproduce anybody. States will outproduce countries. It's sick. The reality is the rhythm of work and rest is now more important than ever. These stats aren't changing, they're getting worse. We live in a culture that's part of the fabric is do more, do more, do more, do more. It's a different type of slavery. The truth is, underworking and overworking, both of those things make us less human because they get the rhythm of work and rest twisted. Work is good, rest is good, only if we're coming at them in a healthy way, when our identity is not tied to what we can produce. So Moses is talking to these Israelites, and he's saying, remember when you were slaves in Egypt. It's not because they'd forgotten 40 years ago we were an enslaved people. It's because they needed to remember that they were slaves before, and they are not any longer. You are no longer a slave. It's easy to forget that we're more than we produce, and that our value isn't what we can accomplish or achieve. Listen, the reason some work 7 days a week or can never shut off, can never sit still, can never rest is that Pharaoh is long dead and God has freed us from slavery. But when our identity is still attached to what we can do and who we can please and the amounts of time spent on the right things, we re-enslave ourselves. So here's the thing. If we're going to remember the Sabbath, if we're going to guard our rest, we must know that rest does not happen by accident. It must be planned, and it must be protected. This is something we have to guard now more than ever. Left to our own devices, we'll quickly spiral into an unhealthy way of approaching our work, of viewing our work, and our ability or inability to find rest. Remembering or guarding the Sabbath actually has more to do with the 6 days of work than it has to do with the 1 day of rest. Anyone who can't obey this command to rest is a self-imposed slave. We're putting ourselves back into the slavery God has invited us out of, God has freed us from. But it's about our heart and the reality of a materialistic world in which we live. Some of us work in unhealthy organizations. Some of us have this insatiable need for more. We believe this lie that like it's the next thing that will bring me satisfaction. All of this begins to take over. Whatever it is for you, it begins to take over if you don't practice the discipline of rest. And it sounds so silly that we must be disciplined in our rest, but it's so true. We read this ancient story, and it's like we're living here and now. It's the same spirit of I am what I do. Sabbath is an act of resistance. I don't live in that way because I don't live in that kingdom. I live in this new kingdom with this new king who invites me to rest in him. It's pushing back against the voices in our heads to do more, to be more, to go more places, do more things, whatever that is. Work is a good thing, but it's not the only thing. Work is a good thing, but it's not the only thing. Sabbath means we're not a slave to our culture's expectations, our family's hopes, our school's demands, my boss's expectation, or even my own insecurities. We have to speak this truth to ourselves, lest we forget. We must both remember and guard this, especially when we hear that voice of Pharaoh creep into our lives. There's this beautiful mantra from Pastor John Mark Comer that I'm going to read, and he says this: enough is enough. I do not have to work more. I do not have to buy more. I do not have to sell more. I do not have to move up in the company. I do not have to get the perfect score. I don't need another stamp on my passport. I don't need another bay in the garage. I don't need to be younger or more beautiful. I don't need to have my kids in ballet or soccer all year long. I don't need to make everybody happy. I don't need to get everything I want. There is no quota. My value doesn't come from what I produce, and my joy and peace don't rise and fall with my net worth. Pharaoh is dead. Egypt is in the past. I'm not a slave anymore. I'm free. And I'm part of a different kingdom now with a different king. When I rest, I simultaneously experience a gift God created for me, and I honor God. That's the Sabbath. It's an invitation to receive a gift, and it's a way of honoring this God who has this divine rhythm of work and rest. Because if I have the inability to rest, what that means is that I am in control. I am the one who calls the shots. I am the one who can make it. I'm the one who can get there. I'm the one who can do it. Rest is acknowledging that it's not always about me. Rest is acknowledging that there's this creator God who is good and who's doing beautiful work that I'm invited into, and who rests to acknowledge. If we never have the opportunity to be still, we're going to miss every opportunity to acknowledge the goodness around us. So I want to close this morning by looking at a couple practical ways we can do this. Like, okay, I need to remember the Sabbath. Sure. I need to guard the Sabbath. Okay. How do I do that? How do I fight against this voice of Pharaoh in my life? The first thing I want to talk about are boundaries. This is being able to protect our Sabbath by having boundaries when we're not exercising the Sabbath. So the 6 days in which I work, I must have boundaries so that I can then be able to unplug, disconnect, and find rest when I do take rest. Too often we spend the first part of our rest winding down, trying to get into a state of rest. And then we have this maybe tiny sliver or a window of rest before we start to then worry about what am I going to come out to on the other side? What work emails are going to be waiting for me? What am I going to walk into when I pick up the kids? What am I going to do when I show up to this event or meeting? And so we don't actually rest. We have to protect the 6 days so that we can fully experience the seventh. Remote work makes this especially hard because what used to be your bedroom or your living room or your kitchen table now doubles as an office. And so you don't have this clear, you could almost say a ritual of walking into a workspace and walking out of a workspace, or a commute that maybe you used to have that you no longer have, which gave you a minute. So maybe you need to create a new ritual that says, okay, I'm moving now into this space. So I'm not going to worry about work emails. I'm not going to take more calls. I'm not going to check in. I'm not going to go to that thing because I'm done with my work today. Maybe it's starting and ending your day on time. My schedule's not going to creep up earlier and earlier, and I'm going to resist this feeling of like, if I just had 20 more minutes, 1 more hour, and then I'll be good. Let me work late this evening and then I'll be okay. No, we need to protect those boundaries at times. It's putting away your phone in the evenings or saying no to somebody. You know, as a parent of 4 younger kids, my wife and I almost daily have conversations with people about, well, what summer camps are they in? Or what sports are they going to start up? Or have you signed him up for the second team? Or I just signed up my kid for his 3rd baseball team this summer. And it's like, stop. They don't have to do every single thing. And we see it in our kids. Maybe your kids are more well-adjusted than mine, but you take away a screen or you stop a facilitated game, and then what do you hear so quickly? I'm bored. I don't know what to do. It's like, great. Be bored. Be bored. Don't feel the need to do something all the time. And not just picking on parents Or my kids, this is the truest in myself. I have such a hard time sitting still. Oh, you know what I could do? I could go do that thing. Or maybe we could go get that thing done that we've been needing to do. But that's actually a lie. I don't chase chores when I'm bored. But there's always like something pulling at us. Maybe I need to go check in on that person. Maybe I should go to that event. Maybe I should sign up for the next thing. No, we have such a hard time just being. We can't shake this feeling that empty space is wasted space. But empty space is not wasted space. Empty space gives us time to be present. It gives us time to acknowledge the goodness of God around us, where we've come from, where we're heading. It allows us to breathe. But beyond boundaries, I want to talk about identity. Much like the nation of Israel needed that gentle reminder and then that command to guard, you are not what you produce. We all have different ways of falling into this lie that I am what I do. So where is it maybe that I'm placing value or my identity, my worth in something that's tied to my ability to produce? Where am I over-reliant in my ability to get my kids everywhere, all the time, on time? Or my ability to continue to rise the corporate ladder, or whatever it is for you in your context? Where is that where you're finding your worth and your value? Because I can guarantee you the moment you find that, you found a way to surrender something to God. You have found an idol in your life, if you want to use that phrase, something that we're overemphasizing our identity and worth onto. And no matter how good or well-intended it is, it begins to kill us. It cuts us off from what God has for us and who He's calling us to be. So we have to identify these things. We have to do some work to say, where is it? Where do I feel like my highest highs and lowest lows? And what am I orienting myself around or toward? And do I need to reevaluate that in my life? Do I need to protect my schedule? Do I need to examine where I'm overly associating my value? Where am I believing the lie that I am what I do? Or maybe even I am what people think or say about me, or I am what I have. Those will help us identify where we need to return back to God. And those ultimately help us guard and protect the Sabbath. Because as we orient around God, we can unorient around all of these other things, all of these other distractions, or all of these selfish ambitions that we carry around. And we can rest in the beauty of what He's doing, what He's done, and what he continues to do. Pray with me.